session, how to get M7 MBA programs, how to get into the M7 MBA programs. Hopefully this session over an hour will be a really good sort of perspective on sort of how to present yourself and what the schools are looking for, et cetera, what differentiates a top candidate from many other really good candidates, et cetera. And so forth. And I'm joined today by three of Leland's fantastic coaches who are effectively the knowledge of the session. So what we're going to do, we're going to introduce ourselves real quick, and then we're going to pose 4 questions to our coaches, and so on and so forth. If you have specific questions that aren't answered as we go through this process, please feel free to leave them. I would prefer you put them into the Q&A, then we don't lose them in the conversation in the chat. But if you want to put them in the chat too, we'll try to track those too. And hopefully we'll have 10 minutes at the end of this session to answer any direct questions. So I'm your host today. My name's Alex Brown. I'm the podcast co-host for Clear Admit Wiretaps. I'm also their community manager, so Livewire is a popular tool that Claire was telling me about before we came on air, and provides quite a lot of anxiety to folks. So I help on the community aspects for Clear Admit, as well as provide guidance. I mean, I used to work at the Wharton School many years ago as an AdCom for 7 years, and I was a consultant for Clear Admit when we were in the admissions consulting business. We're no longer in that business now, but we provide guidance in other ways. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to have each of our panelists quickly introduce themselves in the order. It's Bill, Christine, and Claire. So Bill, if you want to kick off.
Sure. Thank you very much, Alex. I appreciate the intro. My name is Bill Jonas, and I've been a consultant in this arena now for the last 15 plus years, formerly with Stacy Blackman Consulting, now with Leland. Very excited to be here today. I've worked with candidates across the top 20 and work with a lot of a lot of non-traditional candidates, candidates with a wide variety of backgrounds. And so full-time, part-time, and executive. And so been very, very happy to come here and share whatever knowledge I can with you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Bill. Over to you, Christine, in this order. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, I'm Christine Balzano. It's nice to have you all here. I have been working in higher education for a really long time, specifically in MBA admissions, almost 20 years, 18 and a half. And started out on the school side. My first business school was Chicago Booth, then London Business School, and I actually I'm on a contract at Yale for the last 5 years, where I'm fill in for a lot of their programs, whether it's executive MBA, 1-year master's, full-time. So I have been boots on the ground making admissions decisions for my entire career. So yeah, and I've been working with private clients since 2007 when my family moved to England. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm based in Chicago.
Fantastic, Christine. We have things in common. I currently work for LBS, so there we go. In a different role. Over to you, Claire.
Yeah, amazing. And so happy to be with all of you. These are some amazing coaches. So just happy to be part of this panel. I am Claire. As Alex said, Clear Admit was one of my favorite and least favorite things 8 years ago when I was applying to my deferred MBA programs. I was able to get accepted to Stanford and Harvard, and I chose Stanford. Ever since then, I started coaching admissions specifically focused on HSW, M7 broadly, and have spent the past 7 or so years helping 100+ candidates get into their dream schools. Absolutely love it. Deferred was my bread and butter as a result of me being deferred, but have expanded to all types of MBA coaching and have absolutely loved my time as a coach.
Brilliant. And Claire shared with us before we came on air that she's a huge fan of Bill. So there we go.
So I'm just a fangirl. Happy to be here.
No.
Well, thanks.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So on to our first question. And again, put your questions in the Q&A. And I think a lot of your questions will get answered by the way the answers to the main questions that we have. But what we'll do, right at the end, I've seen some of the Q&A questions come in. We'll have a rapid answer session because some of those questions are very easy and can be answered very succinctly. So we will absolutely address those questions right at the end. So if you want one of those questions addressed, stick them in the Q&A and we will get to that. So today's event, our first question, hopefully that will come up so I can read it out correctly. What are the key differences? So this is to you, Bill. What are the key differences between candidates who are competitive for M7 programs versus those who are competitive for top 20 programs, which are still very fine candidates, we know that, but what differentiates someone that's targeting the very, very top?
That is an excellent question. And I do have to kind of caveat this by saying that I have seen candidates that fall out of the general, this is the perfect candidate for an M7, that have gotten into M7 programs. So this is just in general what we see typically. Academically, when you're talking about M7 candidates, they will have typically attended very highly selective undergraduate institutions, Ivy League schools, top international programs, excellent academic records, GPAs usually in the top 10 to 15% of their class, really rigorous majors, usually STEM oriented, economics, finance, or quantitatively demanding kinds of fields, and they almost always show academic awards, scholarships, honors, very, very common in this group. Whereas with the top 20, you can see undergraduates are the institutions are a little more diverse, elite to respected state universities. GPAs are strong, but can be more like the top 25% of their class. And the majors are a little bit more varied, both quantitative and non-quantitative. I would also suggest that the test scores are a big issue, so I should probably not forget about that. The GMAT scores for M7 admits are typically cluster in the 730, 760 range on the traditional GMAT, and above in the 90th percentile, both quant and verbal for GRE. And low test scores can happen, but they usually are offset by other exceptional kind of qualities. For the top 20 programs, the GMAT scores are also competitive, but now you're down in the range of maybe 700 to 730. GRE scores can be slightly lower, but usually in the 80th percentile or above. And again, there's a little bit more flexibility on the test scores. From a professional experience standpoint, I would say that the M7 candidates typically are going to come from bulge bracket investment banks or elite consulting firms, BCG firm. I mean, McKinsey, BCG, Bain, big tech companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, or, highly competitive Fortune 500 corporations. But they all show pretty much at rapid upward trajectory, early promotions, large scope of responsibility, very big impact on their organizations, maybe international assignments, high profile projects, stretch roles. Whereas the top 20 candidates, their work experience is strong, but kind of have a broader range of employers, regional firms, governments, nonprofits. Career progression is important, but it may come as a more standard clip. And again, demonstrating initiative, but impact in smaller scopes, maybe team, department, or community, instead of the kind of big change maker kind of roles that you typically see for M7 candidates. A lot of leadership and extracurricular involvement. With the M7 candidates, they're usually large, very well-funded organizations, large major university or community initiatives, et cetera. And again, this change maker role is evident in these extracurriculars, whereas at the top 20, you might see maybe more kind of smaller kind of groups leading, like a young professionals group or campus involvement, professional development, that kind of thing. And again, just very diverse there all throughout the M7 and the top 20. Diversity of background, very important. Okay, they're always looking for that truly unique perspective that they can get in the classroom environment. from a communication standpoint, I don't want to go on, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. But with respect to the M7 candidates, I would say they're very highly polished communicators. They can articulate very clear, ambitious visions, and very strong emotional intelligence, very self-aware, and they really their recommenders are frequently come from people that are very, very strong in terms of understanding, in their own organizations, but also in helping them to really grow and be able to communicate that growth very effectively. And that is really, about it that I can think of off the top of my head.
Bill, that's absolutely fantastic. As I pass the microphone on to Claire to answer effectively exactly the same question, maybe also speak to what if I did go to a small state school? Am I still qualified for the M7? Or if I went to a company that's not Goldman Sachs or MBB or whatever. So maybe add a sprinkle of little bit of that, because I think Bill makes some great points. The majority of these top candidates do come from the top undergraduate institutions, worked at the top firms. There's no doubt about that. But that's not the only pathway, right?
100%. I think, yeah, Bill, such a comprehensive answer. So I'll try not to be redundant on anything there, but specifically thinking about it, I think you're right. A lot of those candidates and what we see as more traditional candidates, they have jobs, they have careers, they have been in institutions that have like allowed them to show these very clear trajectories. They've been allowed to demonstrate leadership potential. They've been able to do those things. But by no means is it the only way into a top program. And the thing that really sets people apart, especially, whether you're from a smaller boutique fund, you work in a non-traditional path, it's about for what sets M7 apart are people who have found ways within the situation that they're a part of to be a leader, to push for things, to create an impact within the organizations or places that they're a part of. So even if you're not coming from a traditional path, do you have recommenders that will pound the table that you can change the world and that you will make an impact in business? Are you somebody who has found a way to articulate the reason that you need to go to business school and the way that you're on a trajectory that business school can accelerate and support? M7 schools are highly competitive. They are very selective. And as a result, each person in each class is hand selected because they add something new to the community. And so sometimes having a differentiated background can be the thing that makes you stand out. But what really stands out for an M7 candidate and what we work really hard with my clients at least, is figuring out who you are, what you bring to the table, and what your trajectory and path looks like. And being able to articulate that is the key. You could have every blue chip name, you can go to the best school, you can have the best GPA, you can have the best GMAT. But if you cannot articulate who you are, why you want to go to business school, and what you want to do with that experience, you can fall flat and you won't be able to crack into those top schools.
Absolutely fantastic, Claire. Really, actually, I think it complements Bill's response really, really well. Christine, as you tackle this question too, I've seen a couple of comments come in from chat. What if I work for a family business? What if I'm an entrepreneur? Perhaps add that flavor into this dynamic of what differentiates an entrepreneur family business M7 candidate versus top 20.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, really to echo Claire's point, and I think between you and I, Alex, we're kind of the only ones who've been on the admissions side in the room making decisions. There is no one candidate who is going to be better than another. It is everything to do with what you've done with what you have and where you've gone with that. So the distance traveled is as important as whether you had as they say, a silver spoon in your mouth and every opportunity in front of you. As a reader and having read applications for more than 20 years, I care less where you went to school, but how you did when you went there. I care less about the name of the company you worked at, but more about what you did while you were there. So that's why, partly why I like working with non-traditional students and people from, underserved communities and first generation low income. I too am first generation, so maybe that's why. But I do think really strongly that, in order to make an MBA class of people that are really going to be out there, changing the face of business, helping it sort of be an agent for change in society, you really need to blend together all sorts of backgrounds. So that's where entrepreneurs are, great additions to classes, where people who might not have had the opportunity to go to an Ivy League school, whether they could afford it or couldn't get admitted to it or had no idea they could get admitted to it. The texture of the class is really important, and taking into consideration all of the pieces that a person has. So absolutely, there are entrepreneurs. It's about giving me a sense of what your organization is like, what it's done, how you've been able to have measurable impact. And same thing like with family business. See family business applicants all the time for all of the last 20 something years I've been doing this. The more you can demonstrate the understanding of the value of the MBA for what you want to be doing, and maybe I don't know the company that you worked at, the better I'm going to understand what you've done and how the MBA is going to help you do what you want to do next. Those are the key ingredients that help bring different backgrounds, ones that are less stereotypical. And I actually think that people like me on the admissions side prefer to see less of the quote pedigreed, typical, you had all of the opportunities in front of you, experiences, because that's what the world looks like too. So trying to create classes of what the world looks like.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I love this term that you use, distance traveled. I actually wrote it down, then I saw Claire put into the chat that she also loved it. I use the term lived experience, and I assume they effectively mean the same thing. How far has this candidate come? And I think Bill makes some great points. The majority of candidates typically have great opportunities, go to great schools, go to great firms, and really they're on that trajectory. But it's those non-traditional candidates and less traditional candidates and those with lived experience can really add a lot of flavor and color to the classroom, and so forth. I would just add one more component to this. M7, I'm looking for folks that are outstanding academically, outstanding professionally, outstanding outside of work in terms of impacting their communities. For top 20, I might see less of that third bucket, right? I'd still see very strong work, I'd still see very strong academics, and perhaps just not so much impact outside of their work, and possibly even higher test scores, because sometimes the top 20 programs really do lean in on getting us the high test takers, and perhaps a bit more forgiving on folks that aren't as active in their broader communities and so forth. Anyway, that's just my own, that's not Clear Admit's take necessarily, but that's my own take over lots of years. So let's move on to the second question. And we'll start this time with Claire. And we've basically answered a lot of this already, but it's just a different way of asking a similar sort of question. But what are the key attributes of a successful MBA candidate? And how do you demonstrate those attributes? So maybe leaning into that second piece of it too.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered it a lot in this last one, and I want to build off of what we were just talking about. Like we said, there are what could be a traditional candidate, and then there are just candidates, right? And what Christine said so well is that no matter what your background is, the most successful candidates are the ones that are self-reflective, self-aware, and understand what they are bringing to the table and what they can offer to a given program. And so above all else, there are many attributes that we've just gone through that are important, but the most important one is self-awareness and being able to have clarity of vision moving forward and to describe who you are and where you're going to fit into the class. Beyond that, there's a couple other things. You can click into every single M7 school has like 3 main traits that they're looking for. The most popular quick wins and hits are like everyone wants a leader. Leadership is so important to showcase and to show up for, to show, examples of where you've taken initiative and brought others along. There's generally, especially in some schools more than others, that will talk about a deep want, a need for intellectual curiosity. So again, do you seek out opportunities to learn, grow, develop yourself and others? Is it something where you're consistently looking to do more, see more, build? And then once again, and similarly to the self-awareness, do you have clarity of purpose? One of the most important things, and when I get candidates that are coming to me saying, oh, I want to go to business school, and I go, why? And the number one way I know that you probably are not ready for business school or we have a hard path ahead of you is you say, oh, it's something I think I should do. Or, oh, I was told this is what I should do at this point in my career. even the most amazing candidates, if you don't know why you want to go to business school or it doesn't actually add to your purpose and where you're driving towards, business school might not be the best fit for you. And so, some of the best candidates and one of the key attributes is just knowing what your broader purpose is. What are you aiming for in the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? And being able to articulate where you are in that journey from the distance traveled that you've had and the distance that you want to travel going forward and how these programs can bring you along. And so all of these attributes are important, right? Test scores, GPA, recommenders, every single thing builds, but it's these more cohesive aspects to me that make you a successful M7 candidate. It's the people who get into all seven, right? Instead of just getting into a handful and finding the individual fit at one or two. The clients that I've worked with that have swept have an overwhelmingly resounding sense of purpose, demonstrated leadership, and intellectual curiosity that they've taken with them, like we just were talking about and Alex is talking about, at work, at school, in their communities, in their families. And the ones who've figured that out and are able to articulate that strongly, authentically, and in their own way, those are the candidates that stand out and that I feel the most confident in.
Yeah, you used some really interesting. Well, I loved rolling out authentic towards the end too. That was very, very good. You also talked about distance traveled, so that's definitely the theme of this session, I think. Very good. I really encourage folks when you're applying to a particular business school, read its mission statement and make sure your sense of purpose aligns with the mission statement of the school. That's a really good way of sort of anchoring some of that narrative.
When I get into it with my clients too, like I think I would say this to people in undergrad too, like you shouldn't be applying to every Ivy League school in undergrad. They're not the same. I went to Dartmouth. I was not going to like Columbia, right? It's in the big city. I wanted to be in the woods and I wanted liberal arts and education. When you're starting to look at the M7, and we'll talk about it, they are very different
Oh,
programs. They're
yes.
in different places. They give you different career outcomes. They focus on different skills and developing them. And if you're applying with a blanket vision that fits, that you think would just work for any of the M7, it's not true. And similarly, I know this is an M7 panel, but frequently with my clients, there are a bunch of T20 schools that I think fit so well and match the vision of M7. And so frequently, if you're looking at it, there might be top three, four in the M7 that fit really well, paired with some really awesome T20 schools that are more aligned in that vision, in their mission statements, and in the skills that they're looking for and developing in people. So totally, it's worth doing that research.
Yeah, very good. But that is the next question, Claire. So we'll get to that in a minute. Fantastic. So Christine, over to you.
I think the only thing I would probably add is a level of, Claire hit it right on the head. Self-awareness, self-reflection is key in this process, which is why if you've done the work to self-reflect and be aware and understand what your goals and your passions and your purpose is, I don't really care where you worked. I don't really care where you went to school. I just want to know that you have a vision. I think a lot of people believe that in this process, we are looking for a type of candidate that fits a type of mold. And actually, you have more control in this process than you think you do. I know it's hard to imagine, but I'm inclined to hear your story and the case you've made for why an MBA is the next best step for you and truly believe that because I really get excited about wanting to hear what you want to do next and how the MBA is the thing that's going to help you get there. So if you don't fit, like somebody asked if they were a doctor or, if you come from a non-traditional background or family business, if you can make clear to me that you have a sense of purpose for which an MBA makes sense, I want to hear it. I'm excited to get on board with it. I want to see how I can help you. And I'm going to be advocating for you in a committee room to see, where you can fit into this class and expand people's experience and mind about what the face of business looks like. So, other than repeating many of the great things Claire said, I think, give yourself the credit to know that if you have a clear vision about it and you can convince me that that makes sense for why an MBA is the right degree, then, dive in, go for it, take the chance.
I think just to follow up, Christine, before you mute yourself, um, this whole idea of sense of purpose obviously aligns very well with career goals, etc. And I always tell folks, goals need to be realistic based off of who you are. They need to be ambitious. They need to be focused, and they need to be impactful. and ambition, impactful are slightly different things. You can be ambitious but not impactful at all, right? So hitting on all of these, I'm not sure what point I was trying to make, but the point
Well,
is these goals are really important, right?
right. I would agree with you with the caveat that just because you have a sense of direction and an idea of what you want to do doesn't mean you need to know what the title of that job is or the company
Yes.
that you're going to do it. So
Yeah.
you don't have to come in and have this huge clarity about, I want to be the chief marketing officer of Nike. I mean, if that's what your goal is, great, and say so. But if you have an idea of where you want to have impact and what kind of career path seems like it's the right fit for you, 75% of the people that go to business school change their career path once they're there. So you all say something in applications, and 75% of you are going to change what that looks like. We're not holding you to it. We do, however, want to know that you've thought about what an MBA means and that it's not a magic ticket, but it is a very transformational experience that's going to get you to really think about and open your mind to what possibilities can be and are for a future in a particular, category or vertical that you like, whether it's finance or marketing or nonprofit.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Christine. Over to you, Bill.
Well, there's not a whole lot to add to this because this has been some brilliant pro tips here. I mean, fabulous. But I like to point out that we talked about authenticity. One of the things that's incredibly important for candidates is to be very soul-centered. And I know that kind of sounds fluffy, but really, this is a wonderful time to be alive. Back in the day, there were only a limited number of career paths coming out of school. Now they're like a million, right? What do you care about? The why behind the career goal is something that is often overlooked, but it should tie to your lived experiences. What do you care about? What do you want this world to look like? Really think about these things before you start developing your career path. Really do it from your soul, because I promise you, you'll get into a great MBA program. But the question is really going to be this: what's that going to be like for you and the relationships that you're going to develop over the next 10 to 20 to 30 years after you graduate? We talk about fit, it all comes from the heart. It really does. And your career comes from the heart as well. And the world is going to change. Okay, so what you think might be a viable career path today might be gone in 2 years. But the impact that you want to have on the world, the way you see the world, and the way you desire it to be, and the reasons behind that, those are authentic, those are powerful, and those will drive your career ambitions. And it will tell you almost unmistakably if you are accepted to several schools, which one is the one that resonates with you most powerfully, because that's going to be your asset for the next 20 to 30 years. So doing that thought process before you start your application just is incredibly important. And that's one of the things that I really drive all my candidates to do, is really think about the why behind what you're doing and where you really see it going in the future.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic, Bill. And I'm a huge advocate and believer that the MBA is a great route to helping affect change worldwide in lots of different areas. And clearly, I mean, I would argue, and I'm sure many would argue, the world is distressed right now with lots of bad things occurring. And really, we can have a much more meaningful impact if we take your approach, I think. And we can have the wherewithal with a top MBA to affect that positive change of direction and so forth. So, absolutely fantastic. The whys are also very important when you're doing job switches and articulating that. Don't just describe the job switch, but why did you do that, and so on and so forth. And again, back to goals. If you listen to Bill, you better be ambitious. You better be impactful. And back to this notion of focused. Yes, I get it. Some people do change their goals when they get into the MBA. I understand that. I don't like admitting to it all the time. So I'm a huge believer in having a really strong goal focus going in, because what does that do? It provides you a great rudder, a great guide to make the most of that program. And if you do change your goals, as you get introduced to lots of different opportunities in the MBA program you weren't expecting, you will change your goals very deliberately. If you go into an MBA program without that guide and that rudder from the outset, every week you'll follow the herd for the consulting gigs, the investment banking gigs, and the tech gigs, and et cetera, and you'll get absolutely overwhelmed, especially at M7 programs. So I'm just a big advocate of the goals, right? So we can stick with the goals, even though people do pass on them sometimes when they get to their programs. But these are fantastic responses. Thank you very, very much, everyone. We'll move on to the third question. And I know Claire's dying to answer this question quickly, but has already had a good chunk at it. But we'll start with Christine this time. Within the M7 group of programs, and I've articulated them quickly, I'll do it again: Harvard, Stanford, then Wharton, then Chicago and Kellogg, and then Columbia and Sloan. Not necessarily in that order, but that's how I sort of think about them. What are the key differences between the programs in terms of what they offer, career focus, and better? And just as before you start answering, Christine, I'm going to explicitly ask Claire to tell us why she chose one of these programs over the other. So just to prep Claire for that, because I think that'd be quite an interesting conversation. But over to you, Christine.
I think this actually is a really difficult question to answer generally, but also do concisely, mostly because schools are evolving and changing all the time. I've worked for several of them and things change a lot. Some of the deans of those programs have been deans at more than one of the programs I've worked at and more than one of the top schools. So, I think the key piece is you really need to do your research to know what culture fits with you. It's less about what the outcomes are of what jobs you're going to get, because you could go to any of the top 20 schools and get just about any job out there. And sometimes I actually argue that with clients who might not rise to the top sliver of a person at M7 might really shine at a top 20 and get that MBB consulting job they thought they could only get through an M7. I mean, you could categorize and stereotype things like Columbia, Booth, and Wharton are very quant heavy places, have been, but I would argue that, Booth has the most exceptional entrepreneurship opportunities out there, was the first program to have, a new venture, kind of create a business opportunity before other schools had it. They were the genesis of intellectual curiosity and challenging assumptions, but Stanford does that too, and Wharton does that too, and Harvard does that too. So there's very limited that's truly different in terms of, what's offered and what the focus is. Some schools are better at things than others. For example, if you were going into fashion, you really want to go to Columbia or NYU. Those are your best places for that. Other schools will offer some things, but you will be more of a diamond in the rough than, amongst a cadre of people who have similar interests and backgrounds. But if you're talking about finance, if you're talking about consulting, if you're talking about more traditional sort of what Bill was referring to, the sort of standard roles people took post business school when I started doing this in the early 2000s. Yep, I'm that old, everybody. There were sort of more defined pathways. Now you could do almost anything. I kind of always like to say this because I started my career at Booth, and I am very clear that I am biased to Booth. But also I am biased to LBS and Yale too. I think there are great things about every program, but Booth's dean used to say, we have Nobel Prizes in things like finance and economics. If they gave Nobel Prizes in marketing, we'd have those too. And that's because our faculty in marketing at Booth were amazing. That doesn't mean that at Kellogg, they're not the pinnacle of marketing, but by the same token, they have a dean who has come in and who was a finance person at SDA Bocconi, and she is really turning things on their head to say like, hey, we're good at finance too. So it's not to say, to Claire's point earlier, that you should apply to every M7, but look for what people are doing on their way out, what kinds of programs and student groups and, centers of excellence and, entrepreneurial experience opportunities. And whether it's like, at Booth where you have the New Venture Challenge, or at Stanford where you have Startup Garage, things like that are specific, that are going to enhance your experience to give you that sort of more ideal career path, paved career path, I should say, because really you're splitting hairs across any of the top 20 of where you could land career-wise. And yeah, some schools might be a little bit better and have a tilt in their faculty in a certain direction, but that doesn't mean there aren't amazing faculty in accounting or marketing or operations, or, teaching psychology classes within business school that are super valuable.
I thought Wharton had the best marketing faculty. Now you've got me all kinds of
See?
confused.
It's all a matter
And
of
I was
perspective, right?
and I was ready to quit Wharton in the early 2000s. So there we go. But anyway, brilliant. Thanks, Christine. Over to you, Claire. And I won't put you on the spot. You can
That's,
talk about that or not. That's your
yeah.
choice.
No, I think Christina hit it over the head. The only other thing that I think I personally wish I had known, and what I tell everyone, is also like, I think there are a couple of things that you can look at that do feel consistent for schools. So first off, location actually matters. Geography matters, right? You see the West Coast schools, the most people stay in the West Coast. East Coast schools, most people end up in the East Coast. The Midwest has more of a split, but you have the majority of people in the Midwest. And people map to the industries that their schools are nearby, right? So being inherently at GSB, you're in Silicon Valley, you're going to be around tech, right? If you're in more of like the New York, Philly, you get access to healthcare, you get access to banking, you get access to a little bit more of like those industries. That's why Kellogg and Booth are amazing at CPG and retail and more of like those industries, because the Midwest is like the mecca for, Kraft Heinz, McDonald's, or like you got everything in the middle. And so that is something that I think is really important to think about and what makes schools distinctive and matters, right? Like I have a lot of people who went to GSB who are like, wait, I want to go back to New York, and it's difficult sometimes. Another thing to look at is the way that classes are taught and curriculums are developed, right? So HBS stands out. They are case-based exclusively, right? And that changes the way that you learn, that changes the way that you interact with the class, and it changes the way that you develop yourself as a leader. For some people, case-based methods with cold calling is the perfect way to learn. For other people, that actually can put you in your shell for 2 years. For me, I would have like absolutely died. But like it's really important to know. And others are more about, experiential learning. Others have more cohort based. That is an important thing to understand, because that changes the way that you're going to be able to explore and to develop yourself. And so I think those metrics are actually really important. Same with class size, right? If you want to feel like you know every single person in your class, if you want to know like you have one section of people that you're really close to, those are some of the things that I think are very important to picking a school and that people underrate. So if you can, go to the campus, sit in on a class. If you can watch some of the classes online, all of them have them online. See if the teaching style works well with you. See if the industries that they put front and center are interesting to you. That to me is very, very important. But similarly, and to what Christine said, you can find something everywhere, right? Like I got to GSB and I wanted to do marketing, and I went in and they said, maybe should have gone to Kellogg. And realistically, maybe I should have looked at Kellogg, but I ended up being at GSB, finding I was a big fish in a smaller pond looking at marketing. I was one of the few people who wanted to go to Nike marketing, and so I was able to do it, right? There are opportunities to do everything, but it's important to know whether you want to be part of the kind of like broader big industry, or you're okay carving your own path, in which case most schools open up to you.
Brilliant. And I think your emphasis on location is absolutely spot on. When I'm answering apply wire entries, if it's vague to me, I'll ask them, where do you want to be located post MBA? Because absolutely, even the very top programs have a center of concentration around where they are. And I would argue some of the Midwest schools do a better job of pushing candidates to different parts of the world, but that's simply because they don't have that own ecosystem on their back door, like Stanford would with Silicon Valley, or the East Coast does, et cetera, et cetera.
And the
So
last thing I'll say
really
is
good
like
points.
culturally it matters too, right? If you go to school in a big city, my friends who people who go to Columbia and clients that go to Columbia, you live within like a 40-minute radius of everyone.
Yeah.
You're not going to necessarily have that community-based aspect, because not everyone chooses to live in Harlem and be right near school. There are people in Brooklyn, there are people in Lower East Side. If you go to school like a Stanford, everyone is stuck in Palo Alto. They have nothing else to do. So there's community there, but there's also
Doc.
one. And so there's different methods to it. You have these bit middles, but looking suburban, rural, city, those things matter as well for if you want to be in a program where people spend all of their time together and get really close. If you want a program where people are jetting off to different countries, that also matters in terms of what community you're going to get and what your alumni network is going to look like.
And another way to look at that, and then we'll move on, is it's not necessarily just rural versus urban, but it's where did your students come from? So Philadelphia is urban, but I'll tell you, 99% of students didn't come from Philly that go to Wharton. So they all come together. So there is that dynamic to where the students come from. If they're Columbia students, maybe some of them have already got a network in New York, right? So that's kind of a bit of a positive and a potential disadvantage. But over to you, Bill.
Well, with respect to what these schools do, and they are, I think the point that Christine made is they aren't, and this is something I tell my candidates all of the time. These are not programs that are stuck in amber. Okay, they're businesses. They are dynamic, and that's kind of my approach to this whole thing is you got to look at them as a business too. Yes, they are there for certain to teach bright young minds business concepts and leadership skills, for sure. That is absolutely one of their missions. But their other mission as well is they are leading edge business thought providers to organizations, industries, Fortune 500 corporations, and governments of the world. Okay, that's what keeps them relevant. And the world is changing, and they are changing. If you take a look at a program like Wharton, for example, Alex, they've invested quite heavily in their West Coast presence through their executive MBA campus in San Francisco, where, by the way, they are now the #1 executive MBA program on the West Coast because of their excellent, reputation and the way they've conducted their business. Why did they do that? Because they wanted to become more technologically and entrepreneurially relevant. And they're doing it. And they're building a brilliant East Coast, West Coast network. And this actually plays a little bit into the application process itself. Because when you're trying to when you're applying, what you're really trying to do, you're pitching, you're trying to demonstrate how you add value to them. How are you going to add value to this program? It really helps to understand where they're going, what direction they're heading, why they're going in that direction, and how you're going to contribute to that forward momentum. So this is something, again, that I think the concept of, well, the traditional, hey, this program's only good in economics, this program's only good in management consulting, it is absolutely not the case anymore. And these programs are continuously evolving. And it's great. If you really want to know what's going on there, listen to the voices, follow these programs, hear what they're saying. Who are the voices in these programs? What are they saying? This gives you a really good idea of the trajectory of these programs, which are very, very important as you're developing your applications.
Yeah, brilliant, Bill. I will say I was at Wharton when they launched the West Coast campus. I'm not saying I had anything to do with it, but I did go visit at least once or twice. But also, as you say, follow some of these key leaders from the schools that you're targeting. So, for instance, I'm big into marketing. I'm obviously big into Wharton. So I follow Peter Fader, and anything he says on LinkedIn, I consume every day, right? He's customer lifetime value person. But if you really want to get into the understanding of the opportunities at some of these schools that you're seeking out, find some of their prominent faculty on LinkedIn and just follow them. That would be a really interesting approach. Anyway, we're getting shorter on time. I want to get to this is sort of more rapid response time. So we're asking each of the panelists for 2 myths that they state and debunk very concisely. So Christine, you've unmuted yourself. I'll let you lead this off.
Okay. 2 myths. There are so many. I don't care what round you apply in.
Oh, that's the rule. Don't repeat a myth that someone else has already had because there are loads of them. So you get the first go,
I did
Christine.
get lucky. You don't have to apply in the first round. Stop listening to people that went to MBA programs who told you they got in because they applied to the first round. They have no idea why they got in and when they got in. Apply to the round where your application is most well prepared to demonstrate what you're capable of doing. And another myth of this process is that we only look at pedigreed schools and institutions and say yes to all those first, and then we go and find a few extras. That's not a thing. We look at everybody holistically. We read everything. Like I said earlier, I really don't care where you went to school as long as you did well there and you can show me you can handle the academic rigor. It's a nice to have if you went somewhere that was more challenging. But again, show me what you've done with what your experience was, because maybe you went somewhere on an athletic scholarship, or maybe you went to your local school because your family had no money. I don't care. I want to know what you did and what you've created for yourself. So those are my two myths. Don't worry so much about who.
I love the second myth. Any exceptions to the first myth? Is there any type of candidate that you would say, yeah, you probably need to be in the first round?
You know what? If your application is ready and you're really excited about a program and you feel that you are putting your best foot forward, absolutely go for it. But do not rush to get a subpar application in for the first round just because you think it will put you in front of people sooner. There is no such thing as we will run out of spaces. Schools read applications, taking into consideration the historical data of all of the years past of how many people apply in what round, how many people they ultimately admit, and how many people say yes, and model based on that. It does fluctuate because every year is different and people decide to apply to business school when they apply, but the largest application round is and has been for the last 20 plus years of my doing this, the second round. It probably always will be. And, if you want to apply in the first round, it gives you a great shot to put yourself in front of them. But if something is subpar or a little bit of a concern, I'm going to maybe pause and say, all right, let's invite you to interview and see what happens. But I still may say wait list because I want to see what's coming in round two. So if you can do something about that thing that's subpar, I'd rather see you in round two.
Very, very good. Okay, Bill, to you, two myths,
Ah,
and you bunked them both.
oh man. Yeah, there's so many. But I will give you this one that you have to that the one of the big myths is that you have to have an enormously quantitative background to achieve success in an M7 or top 20 program. That is not true. Okay. There are people that come in from non-quantitative backgrounds. You do have to have quantitative aptitude, which is developable, very easily developable. You don't have to have, the extraordinary, backgrounds like an engineering background or a finance background or an accounting background. There are ways to demonstrate quantitative aptitude. In fact, I'm probably going to be setting up a special session just to discuss this on Leland, and Claire's going to help me, of course, because she's great. But that's one of the big myths. The second one I want to get to right now is I'm too old to go into a full-time program. I'm too old. And I'm just going to tell you that is not true. Okay. The question is not your age. The question is, do you have the ability, the capacity, the desire to learn from the people who are all around you? Is your mind open? Can you socialize? Are you going to be that network connection that everybody loves? That's more relevant than your age. So please do not automatically, if anybody's out there listening, don't disqualify yourself based on an age. That is not the way.
I would imagine, Bill, as an older candidate, maybe a little bit more emphasis on explaining the why now aspect
Yes.
of getting the MBA, right? And the fit aspects, showing that you're
Always,
really
always the
fit.
fit.
It's a
Always
really
the fit.
great,
Yes.
it's a really great point, Bill. I would add to that that if you are a person who has more career experience, just make your case for why the MBA fits, because we want on the reading side want to be clear that you realize that whatever level of job you're wanting to go into, that may not be the types of recruiters that come to campus. It may be a more self-directed career search. You will, of course, be surrounded by great and amazing people. But if you can make clear to me as a reader that this timing makes sense for you and full-time is the right path, also make clear to me that you are aware that, you're going to have to be doing your own path and or that you realize that there's value in every level of people's experience. Great, great myth, Bill. I love it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that, Christine. Thank you very much, Bill. Over to you, Claire.
You guys took all the good, no, not all the good ones, it's some of them. I think that just add on to Bill's, I just like, and we've talked about this entire time, like, I guess I don't know how to phrase this as a myth, but it's like, you don't know if you're going to get in, whether or not you can apply. You can go on any of these message boards, like, what are my chances, chance analysis to me, all these things. The only people who are counting you in or out are the literal admissions committee. So you should not be, I do not think it is a productive exercise other than being realistic with where you want to go, where you think you can go. Let admissions, like Bill said, let admissions decide if you're not the right candidate for it. Do not pre-rule yourself out. And so I completely reject this, like, there is a correct candidate, there are the right stats, there's the right candidate. That is like 100% false to me. And then I think the last one, and we've talked about this a lot, but I think that like name, brand, and prestige are a myth to some extent. There's a real benefit to it, right? There are benefits to having them, but the right program for you does not mean the highest number on the list all the time. It might mean somewhere in the middle. It might mean something else. It requires you figuring out what your goals are, what's going to serve you the best, and where you're going to be the best fit and feel the most comfortable to take advantage of the program that you are part of. And so yes, the rankings matter, but at the same time, what program is best for you is not always going to just be the highest number.
Yeah, the rankings matter if the rankings are somewhat of a facsimile of being half correct. Most times these rankings aren't even accurate anyway because they're completely nuts on how they run their algorithms, whatever you call it.
100%.
But
And some
but there we
schools
go. And
used to play
if
that
anyone
game.
wants to know what the rankings are, I can tell you. But then other people might disagree with me. But they've got that wrong anyway. But
Depends
anyway,
on
over
where
to
you
you.
find your ranking, right?
Yes, exactly, exactly. So what I'm going to do really quick is go through the questions on the Q&A. I'll provide quick answers if they're there. I'll ask our panelists to help me if they're not, and then we'll have a final round of sort of wrapping things up. But Nishi is asking, when you review successful applications, what do they have in common that isn't listed on school websites? I think that's what this session has all been about. So hopefully if there's a recording of this session, you can go back, listen through it again, et cetera, et cetera. That should be helpful. If someone doesn't have a strong GMAT GRE, what have you seen actually work to overcome that? So they'll look at the GPA, and you can also take additional coursework, right? So think of your GPA, additional coursework, and test scores all helping tell a similar story. I'm a physician transitioning into finance. Brilliant. Investment banking roles. How do I make sure that my narrative comes across as well thought out instead of sounding like a fickle-minded person who can't pick a profession? Well, have a good long-term goal. Anchor
Yeah.
things into a good long-term ambition, and I think you can make good sense. If you can do investment banking that focuses on healthcare or something that's related to your past work and experience, that adds a reason that the school might reach out to you and apply to Cornell because they're brilliant at helping people transition into investment banking if you're not targeting M7. What score for GMAT is considered by most schools to get in any scholarship opportunities? So think about scholarship. Um, just look at the median scores of the schools you're targeting, right? So I think one of our panelists expressed, I think it was Bill, that M7 it might be 740 sort of median GMAT score. So if you want scholarships, probably going to be at least at that. But also recognize that test score is just one component of a whole suite of your profile. So I always think of test scores. Yes, you've got to really nail it, but then move on and really focus on the other stuff that potentially is going to be more meaningful. How can I overcome a career gap? Explain it um, briefly in the optional essay. Explain what you did during that career gap to make it more meaningful. If you did some volunteer work, etc., etc., that would be great. Is there impact of a letter of recommendation coming from a B school alum? I intend to apply to the M7. This is a super interesting question. Should I get letters of recommendation or additional sort of support letters from folks at the school or alums? I would say yes, if you know them well. Don't just try to introduce yourself to someone to see if that can help you through the admissions process. So really seek out folks and don't compromise who knows you really well to write those letters of recommendation just to find an alum that might know you half well. I think that would be a bit of a mistake. For the Indian pool, it always feels like everyone has super high GMAT scores. Is this a myth or is it real that Indian? I don't think you need to score 40 or 50 points more. there's definitely a bit of a myth out there or whatever that you're expected to have a slightly higher test score. If you think of it, different parts of the world have different testing cultures, et cetera, and that dials into that. Anyway, I've tried to tackle some of those questions. We have, and there are a few more that I've missed, but hopefully they were generally answered in this session. What I want to do, just finally, we've got 3 minutes left to have each of our panelists sort of wrap up and provide whatever minutes worth of insight or guidance or follow up or whatever that they want to do, and then we will conclude. So we'll go Christine, Bill, and Claire in that order. So over to you, Christine, to figure out what you're going to do for the next minute.
So final, I think parting thoughts are, don't rush the process. Do your due diligence, as Claire mentioned, with figuring out what schools are a good fit for you. Don't overstretch the number of schools you're applying to just to kind of cover all your bases. Really think about what you want, what kind of community you want to be in, you know, how that fits with you, what your goals are. The more reflective you are on the front end and the more time you take to think about who you are and how you want to show up at a school, the better it's going to come across in your application. And you know, engage with schools when you can, not because it matters in the process, because of course not everybody can come and visit, but for the benefit of learning about that program, the people that go to that program, the kinds of outcomes they have, because you'll get your right feeling, just like you did when you were an undergrad and you walked onto that campus and you were like, this is my home. You'll have the same kind of feeling looking for the right school. And, you know, get advice from people who really know what this process is. You know, people who have gotten MBAs know a lot about getting MBAs and their experience. They are not necessarily always the best people that can tell you how the application process works. So, you know, balance the information you're getting, consider the place it's coming from. And my last little tidbit is a tiny little story that I once had a consult with somebody who said, you know, I was told by a consultant that they've never seen anybody get admitted with this score that she had. And my question was, have they ever worked in an admissions office? And she said no. And I said, and that's why they've never seen anybody who's been admitted with this score, because it is an art, not a science. If we were only looking at numbers, there would be an algorithm that would have replaced me 20 years ago.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Christine. Over to you, Bill.
Well, I mean, so much good work there, Christine. Those were some great pro tips. Thank you, by the way, to everybody. I'm learning things. You know, I think then the process of being continually learning is the hallmark of great MBA candidates. Never know everything. There's always things to learn. And also, one of the things that I did want to mention, and I don't think it got enough emphasis, reach beyond yourself to help others without anticipation of anything in return. It is a behavioral characteristic that is highly desirable by all of the top programs because it translates almost directly into your value add as an alumnus, where hopefully you will be a partner to the placement office, identifying internships and job opportunities for future graduates, business to business opportunities for alumni, and even potentially identifying valuable research streams for faculty in the future. But that behavioral characteristic of reaching beyond yourself to help others without expectation of anything in return, that's that value added kind of behavioral concept that is, you know, it's good for your soul too. So I'm all about it. And that's the way we make this world not a horrible place to live in. And it shows up very brightly in your applications.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Bill. Over to you, Claire.
I'll be quick because I think they really covered it. But I think the one thing I just want to say, and I say this to basically everyone, is like, be kind to yourself in this process. And like, just know that showing up for yourself to like learn about, consider investing in yourself is such an amazing step in the process. And it is not to be underrated of how difficult, stressful this process can feel like. And so making sure throughout this process, you are checking in on yourself, you're doing things that make you happy, you're reminding yourself why you're doing this, just really like making sure that you know that this is amazing, and just investing in yourself in this process is awesome. And so hopefully it can be as fun and as reflective and as unpainful as possible. But yeah, I just want to congratulate you all for thinking about this and for being here.
No, that's brilliant. Actually, you raise a great point, Claire. There's a lot of value to be driven personally out of the process of preparing your MBA applications. That self-reflection that you need to go through to do a really effective job is absolutely fantastic. I couldn't thank you enough. All three panelists have been absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much, Claire. Thank you very much, Bill, and thank you very much, Christine. You've provided an hour's worth of really terrific insight. And finally, thanks to my colleague Mike for setting this up and making this so successful. So thank you very much, everybody. Really terrific job. I always love these types of sessions. So maybe hopefully we can do another one at some point. So yeah, brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye. Thank
Thanks,
you all.
everybody. Nice to see you all. Good luck.